Hey everybody, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. It is in the wee hours of July 5th. I hope you all had a safe and happy, 4th of July this year. This is probably the weirdest 4th of July I think I've ever had in terms of coronavirus and lockdown and imagining what's going to be facing us come the fall. So bear with me. Anyways, if you listened to the podcast last week, I mentioned that I was going to try to put up the shows from the archives for those folks who are looking for their fix of the Out to Coop podcast this week. So I thought I'd give you a little treat. Kind of in between vacations here. There will probably next week, there may or may not be an additional thing. I'm probably going to do a little bit of a short ad-lib update from the road. But for this week, I dug into the archives and I'm giving you a show that is from July 13th, 2017. And so it's actually... this time of year is usually when my family and I we go on vacation, and so we take a little bit of break. So it was the show kind of coming back from vacation in 2017. So this is, of course, 6 months, basically 6 months plus after Donald Trump took office. And the show was it was interesting, I guess, going back through the archives and seeing this line, the line of racism, the line of police brutality, the line of really the line of the Republican Party as the evil that needs to be purged from our political life in order to kind of save any kind of form of reasonable democratic future. And so one of the things that I've been hearing emphasized, and this is a recurring theme that has been emerging in the Michael Brooks show in the podcast, in the Benjamin Dixon show that I've been plugging a lot lately, and of course in the Majority Report, about, on the one hand, the Trump, and this is something that Michael Moore has always said, right? Trump, yes, we got to get rid of Trump, right? But we got to get rid of the conditions that brought us Trump. And what was going on back in that July 2017 really was the kind of introduction of what got us to where we are today. And basically it's business as usual for the Republican Party. And our lead story is starts with Senator Turtle, aka Mitch McConnell, prepares to introduce GOP healthcare bill. Right, Medicaid cuts remain. Right, dangles dollars in an attempt to pass the new version exactly the way he said he would. Right, so this was once again proof positive that the problem is not simply Donald Trump, but is the Republican Party. But so, anyways, I don't want to kind of go into a long rambling intro to today's show, but I do want to thank you all for again continuing to be supporters of Raging Chicken Press and Raging Chicken's radio and Raging Chicken Media. As you all know, things have been kind of in a flux in a bit, and I've been putting a lot more attention to what's going on in the podcast and setting up some interviews coming up and things like this to make one more go at this, to keep this moving. I do believe a lot in the importance of independent progressive media, homegrown progressive media, not simply that's reporting on national news, but stuff that's reporting on things that are happening right here in Pennsylvania, and frankly, establishing and maintaining and supporting those outlets that are in our neighborhoods and our communities, media outlets like this one, that is going to be there and is going to cover the issues when they emerge. One of the things, this last thing I'll say before I can let you go to the archive episode, but one of the things that I think they understood a lot on the right was that the importance of building capacity, right? Even when you don't have the audience there, even when you don't have, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people, thousands of people, even for that matter, that are clamoring to be part of a particular project. The important thing is that you have to build this capacity, right? This is what Milton Friedman understood. You've heard me talk about this in the podcast before. Milton Friedman understood this when he's first offering the ideas, this radical kind of libertarian view of economics, of capitalism, that their ideas were not popular, right? So they had to put their energies into building capacity so that when opportunities arose that they would be able to fill the void, right? The ideas lying around. And it's something that, again, for long-time listeners, you've probably heard me say this before, but something that, Rick Smith said to me once, Rick Smith from the Rick Smith Show, he said to me once, the idea is that, if you're in the room long enough, right, that there's going to be an opportunity and someone's going to actually notice, right? Someone's then actually going to, see, oh, yeah, this is what we got to do. And just as a brief anecdote for around this line, right? So even though Raging Chicken Press, right, we have not been, say publishing in our writing as much, right, of late, the capacity is there, right? And as you know in the past, that we've been able to do things, we've been able to kind of break stories that have gone national. We've been able to kind of expose wrongdoings that have happening right here in our backyards. We've been able to unpack, I'm obviously, in the PASSHE system, I'm at Kutztown University, been able to kind of create a record to point to of budgetary and financial malfeasance, right, and malpractice, really, and lies. Can be honest, right? That has taken place in terms of the way that Kutztown University's administration or the PASSHE administration has actually approached their budgeting and finances and the stories they've been telling about their quote unquote crisis. But anyways, and so you're creating that certain kind of record, and we've been doing that. We've been doing that stuff, and I've been waiting for a range of different things to come together lately. One. Looking for, new writers, new talent, new people, and new kind of points of collaboration. And if you recall back in, it must have been like February or March, I felt we were really on this verge of kind of making this next programming shift in terms of what we're doing in the podcast. And then the coronavirus hit, and that just threw everything for a loop. And I don't even think that it's... I don't even think that I fully knew or understood at the time how much of an impact it was going to be, especially when, once the kids were homeschooling and having to shift everything to online education, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, so that one kind of little anecdote I was going to say was that, we had, I had somebody contacted me out of the blue, right? And I'll probably say more about this next week, but contacted me out of the blue, haven't heard, talked to this person in a while, and I said, hey, we heard that this particular office got, an email saying that, X, Y, and Z, right? I'll lay this out a little bit more once I have, say, proof positive this is something that actually happened. And they, this person said, I just wanted to get it where it needed to be. We wanted to get this information where it needed to be. I'll have more confirmation next week, and I'll get back to you. Right, and that's what it means to build capacity, right? You're building that capacity so for when you need it, it is there, right? Not just for the, when everything's nice and glossy, not for when everything is hunky-dory, not for when times are great, not for when, everyone's paying attention to politics and that stuff, but to be there consistently, right? And sometimes it can be a slog, sometimes... you feel like, okay, we could only do this one more thing, then next can happen. But anyways, that's what it means to be, right? And that's why, I appreciate those of you, there's been, some of you have been with us since the very beginning. You've been since we first launched, Raging Chicken back in 2011, to when we first launched the podcast, which was, I believe, 2016 or 15, 13 maybe, yeah. And I appreciate that because that's really, you're the people that we're talking to, right? You and your friends, and you just want to give you more plug to, share these podcasts with people. Share them to your social media accounts, and tell people a little bit. Give them that little kind of bit of, comment alongside saying, hey, this is why I listen to this, is why you should listen to it too. Really appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to this and might be kind of tuning in for the first time, if you like what you hear, you become a member of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/rcpress. And choose your membership level right there and support homegrown progressive media. Help build that capacity that we're going to need, not just for next week, right, but for the next couple decades, as we attempt to kind of undo the unprecedented damage that has been done to this country, to our state, to our civic culture, whatever you want to say. This has been incredible. But so with that, I'll give you the Out to Coop episode. This is episode 52 from July 13th, 2017. And the title of it was the GOP Senate Health Bill 101, Battle for the Net. This is police tear gas anti-fascists in Virginia. Harrisburg police and surveillance, PA budget mess, PASSHE report, teleportation, and Mars housing. There you go. You get it all right here at Raging Chicken. So thank you all very much, and I'll turn you over now to episode 52 from the archives from July 13th, 2017. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. Talk to you soon.
My caffeine might be wearing off, but I am ready.
It's Thursday, July 13th, 2017. Yes, it's a special Thursday. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out the Coop podcast. I'm Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. Each week I talk to our Capitol muckraker-in-chief, Sean Kitchen, about the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. Senator Turtle, a.k.a. Mitch McConnell, prepares to introduce GOP Healthcare Bill 1.1 today. Medicaid cuts remain. Dangles dollars in attempt to pass the new version exactly in the way we said he would. Big news, Joe Scarborough of Morning Joe leaves the Republican Party to media fanfare. But who really cares? FCC looks to end net neutrality. Over 100,000 websites, activists, and organizations stage online protests in defense of a free and open internet. G20 protests say that another world is not only possible, it's necessary. Ninja Turtle riot police tear gas anti-KKK protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia. 23 people were arrested. As it turns out, police made house calls ahead of the protest, showing either that they really care or that our surveillance state has gotten way out of hand. Harrisburg police inadvertently admit that they are sharing and consulting with State Surveillance Center, the so-called fusion centers. Our little slice of Big Brother right here in the Keystone State, folks. Governor Wolf allows a hollow budget to go into effect. PA state lawmakers decide a revenue package, not really that urgent. And they try to sneak one last attack against Medicaid before they went off to enjoy their summer. Long-awaited consultant report on the future of PASSHE, Pennsylvania's 14 public universities, was presented yesterday at the Board of Governors meeting. What will this mean for the future of public higher education in the state? A second PA Senate review on PASSHE is due out December 1st. In space news today, beam me up, Scotty, except in Chinese. Chinese scientists successfully teleport a photon to a satellite in orbit. NASA awards $200,000 for Mars housing. Huge advances in use of recycled materials in construction. Imagine if we had the will to do it here. Fittingly, Pizza Boy releases flying laser beams. Sean says, "Cry me a river." Gollum reads Trump, and all that and more on today's show. It's a reminder to tune in to The Rick Smith Show on Free Speech TV this and every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll be back there once again giving the weekly resistance report this week. You can stream the show live at freespeech.org, or you can tune in on Dish Network, DirecTV, or use the Free Speech TV app on Roku. If you missed the show, no problem. Go to thericksmithshow.com and click on the Free Speech TV icon in the sidebar. As remember, the only way we can keep doing what we're doing is because of you, of the people who've stepped up to become members of Raging Chicken Press. We need you to help keep Pull No Punches progressive media going strong. Become a member of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Simply go to ragingchickenpress.org and look for the Support and Membership tab. Click Become a Member and you're on your way. Not ready to become a member? Hey, no problem. You can make a one-time donation by clicking Donate. We need you, the progressive community, step up and help us deepen Pull No Punches progressive media that will hold power accountable. And right now, we have got running a special membership offer through the end of July. So we got a couple more weeks left on this one, guys. Become a member at the $15 a month level, and we will send you a copy of Naomi Klein's latest book, No Is Not Enough, Resisting Trump's Shock Politics and Winning the World That We Need. And like I've said before on this podcast, this is a book that I think everybody should be reading this summer. It's the kind of recharge and rethink and get ready for the fight for the long term ahead. I strongly recommend, I'm almost done with the book, strongly recommend this book by Naomi Klein. And there's no better way to get it than become a member at the $15 a month here at Raging Chicken Press. So welcome to the mid of summer, Sean. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
For whatever
I'm
reason,
experiencing all this winning. We're just winning.
You're winning all over the place. Like winning.
Winning, yeah. I mean, winning. We're watching the Chinese shoot things up into space, winning. Taking a couple steps back in the world, winning. And yeah, just all this winning. I can't. Get all this winning off of me when I get a shower.
I told you wouldn't be able to stand it. How much winning we'd be having. Oh man. So, I mean, this has been, for whatever reason, I'm more rested today than normal. It's probably because I didn't stay up to 3 o'clock in the morning watching news and reading stuff. And then I got up late. So I guess that's it.
I went to bed at 7:30 last night, took a nap, woke up at 10. And it was just I'm just going back to bed.
Well, I woke up this morning and I guess this took me by surprise. I guess this took me by surprise in a way that was, I guess just because I had a more relaxing day yesterday, that I wasn't kind of like sitting in front of my computer for the entire time when I wasn't watching actually PASSHE hearings, which we'll get to later. But I woke up this morning and listened to the news. I was dropping my kids off to school and saw that McConnell is preparing to introduce GOP healthcare, horrors 1.1 today. I mean, that took me by surprise. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I didn't know about it until you said something this morning, until you said something during the show notes. And, I've one of the things I've done lately is tune myself out of watching the national news, of watching cable TV. And when I was home a couple weeks ago, it took me by surprise how much out of the loop I am, but also oh, look, there's Harold Ford Jr. saying, Trump is right to go after people in Syria. We should be starting a war in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Nope. Nothing much has changed, with the media.
No, that's true. It's what's interesting here. I'll on that vein, it's interesting you bring this up. I was just thinking about this morning because, I'll watch when I can. I'll watch Rachel Maddow show and Chris Hayes is All In, and that is about as far deep as I can get into any kind of cable news without losing my mind. I turn on CNN and I can't. I literally my chest gets tight because I can't stand it so much. But you go to Rachel Maddow show to find out what's happening in the Russia investigation, right? That's really what Russia. Yeah, exactly, right. So you find out what's happening there. That's interesting. And then with Chris Hayes, you tend to get a little bit more of a policy bent on stuff. So you get a little bit more of what's going on. So that's my dip into the cable news world. But mostly it's stuff, I'm reading stuff that I'm getting in online. I've made it a point to have the Washington Post app, for having the Guardian app and even our local intelligencer.
Well, I get most of my news from the resistance hashtag on Twitter.
Yeah, resistance hashtag. You like the Democratic Party now? That's pretty crazy. It's kind of that's a discussion for another day, because I could just go off on that for crazy, and I see that you knew that.
I think we'll be talking about the resistance hashtag in a few minutes, looking at the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. But what was I guess was interesting about this coming up today, and I was going to say the second point I was going to make. I dropped my kids off to school today, and usually I'm listening to a piece of a podcast or something like that. I mean, it's only like a 2-minute drive or something like this, and just today, for whatever reason, I put on an NPR. And that's what I heard him saying they're preparing to introduce this bill today. And I was like, whoa, I didn't watch the news last night. I decided I just needed to detox a little bit last night. And so that took me a little bit by surprise. But right now, the bill, the way it's looking, it's basically going to follow the same outlines as the previous version. Virtually no major changes to the cuts in Medicaid that they're proposing. If you remember, when we talked about this, when they're getting ready to vote on it, I think they're getting ready to vote on it while we're in the podcast, right? While we're recording, I think we said two things, or I mean, one of the things I said is that they're going to throw money in particular places. They put the bill out for getting close to a vote to find out where people were, and then they knew who to target. And we know that you have the quote unquote moderates in the Republican Party coming out and talking about, oh my God, the opioid crisis, not enough for the opioid crisis. So here you go, $45 billion on new money to combat the opioid crisis. So there's your payoff to those senators who were kind of crying opioid. There's also it's going to be not full repeal of all the ACA's taxes on wealthy people. So there'll be a little chunk. It won't go all the way up. It won't be a full repeal. So some of that money will stay back in, and to help quote unquote stabilize the fund. Because if you've been following any of this stuff on healthcare, what's going on with Cruz has been Ted Cruz is basically saying what we need to do is we need to everyone has to have, if you want to offer insurance, you have to have one plan that meets all the Obamacare rules. In other words, you can't kick people off for pre-existing conditions, right? You can't kind of have caps on lifetime limits, right? You actually have to cover stuff, right? As long as you offer one of those plans, then you can do it. Then you can offer any other plans you want. And yes, people need to get insurance, but you can get this other insurance over here that only costs you $50 a month. Doesn't cover anything, right? So it's just basically you as an individual. What's that?
I'm covered in name only.
Yeah, and it's like this is a way for individuals, right, to actually subsidize healthcare insurance companies, right? That's really what it is. It's like so instead of you being taxed, right? You're just going to have to go out here and you're going to go out, you're going to buy this product that is worthless, right? So that you can give some money to healthcare companies. That's really what it is, right? Because it's not going to cover virtually nothing, right? At the low end of that. And then, but if you're sick, right, you're going to want one of those high-end plans. So that's available, right? There's your options, right? But the problem is that it means anybody who thinks that they're healthy is going to buy this stuff that's low cost, right? And anybody who thinks that, or they're sick or they're worried about being sick is going to go into the high cost plans, which then you basically consolidate all the sick people, all the people who are in desperate need of insurance right now into those other plans, and they're going to be astronomically expensive then, right? So even like the healthcare industry is the health insurance industry is against this because the risk basically goes through the roof. It's basically a backdoor way of making the Obamacare plans, quote unquote, they're high risk pools, and that's it. And that'll bring everything down. Right? So this is what they're proposing right now. And it's really interesting because there's been two defectors, Rand Paul, and I'm not sure who the other person is. I want to say it's Ted Cruz, I think, is going to be brought in by this one, but I think there's at least one other person that's saying that they're not going to vote for it. And I'm sorry, I should have done more of my research to say that they're going to do it. But Rand Paul's the one who's been out and said, no, we're not going to do this. There's one other person that they know is not going to vote. So McConnell's got no room here, right? Because he can only afford to lose two on this vote. They're 11:30 today, right? Again, this is Thursday, 11:30 today. There's going to be a press conference. They're going to release this and they're going to talk about this. And they're going to see if they can actually get a vote. This is going to be interesting. And the fact that McConnell has also said that he doesn't want to go to recess yet, he wants to get this thing through, is telling about to what ends that they're going to go to try to take healthcare away from people.
Can I interject here real quick? I have a simple solution for this. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called single payer healthcare or universal healthcare. You know, I think.
Wait, you mean like everybody would have health insurance? Like just because?
Just because of existence, you would have health insurance.
It's too simple, man. It won't work, right? Don't you know?
I know.
Don't you know how what a complex world healthcare is? It's crazy.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
I mean, people hate government bureaucracies, but you're having a corporate bureaucracy determine if you live or die. I mean, that's pretty much like what's happening here with the healthcare stuff. And I feel like we've reached a point within the Democratic Party where this is a purity test. Universal healthcare is a purity test. If you don't support it, goodbye. Don't waste our time. Don't bother running, because you're going to go down for that. You'll be remembered as someone who doesn't support universal healthcare.
I'm with you. I think a purity test. I'm fine even talking about it like that. Right? This is it. Either you're in, you're out. This is the tick box. Right? Are you in for this? No. See ya. Right? You don't get funds. You don't get my support. We're going to primary your shit. Right? That's what we're going to do. There's no way around it. And we were talking about a little this before the show today, is that given what the Republican Party is doing right now and the lack of any real kind of leadership for the Democratic Party, this is like a leapfrog moment, I think, for the left. And what I mean by that is exactly what you say. Enough of the toying around with like these complex algorithms to kind of make healthcare work for insurance companies. Screw it, man. Let's leapfrog this universal healthcare. That's it. We're going to go single payer. That's it. And then while we're at it, let's look at the other things. Higher education costs are absolutely out of control and nobody wants to do anything about it. Boom. Free higher education. That's where we should be going. This is where Bernie Sanders, right on the mark. Right. So we take those two things, right, and a whole bunch of other stuff, but take those two things as your money points. And I think there's your purity test. Let's go, man. Let's enough of this because nobody can stand the complexity and the insanity around these kind of discussions. Right. What I want, right, and most people I talk to want, they want it simple. You go to your doctor, you get health care. Right? You need an education, you go get there. You don't have to worry about kind of like some bank coming for your home in the future just so you can get an education, right? And you don't have to worry about kind of going bankrupt or actually going to see the doctor. Seems to make sense to me, Sean.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I mean, I remember talking to a truck driver, right, from Canada who was driving furniture into dorm furniture at LaSalle one summer. He broke his leg in New York City. You know what happened?
No.
Went to the hospital. They fixed him up, and they billed the government $20,000 for his hospital stay and getting his leg fixed.
Billed the Canadian government.
Yeah, billed the Canadian government. The Canadian government took care of it. No problems.
So that even works for them when they're outside the country.
Yes.
Wow. It's funny. We were in Ireland. My wife and I. This is before we had kids and everything. And she got this kind of eye infection. Right, this really bad eye infection, and we're sitting there. What are we going to do? So we found this little hole in the wall doctor. We were in this very small town, right? Hole in the wall doctor there. It went in. Yeah, we're Americans, right? So we had to pay like a penalty or something like this. So we ended up paying like walk into a regular doctor's office. They saw us. We had to wait maybe 20 minutes at a regular doctor's office. Wait 20 minutes, and we had to pay like $20. Right? If we hadn't been, we haven't been Americans, that would have cost us anything. I mean, that's what it looks like for other people in the world, folks.
Yeah.
And why on earth we call that, freedom? Why we call freedom like the freedom to not be able to see a doctor is insane to me. But whatever, that's the state of our politics. But, I think things are going to get better now, though, Sean, because I know that you've been hyping this up online all week since it came out. Joe Scarborough, man, left the Republican Party.
I broke the news about that. Didn't you hear?
Yeah, that was huge, man.
And the resistance is going nuts right now, saying, "Yeah, welcome to our side, Joe. Welcome to our side." No. That's bullshit. Who really cares that Joe became an independent? Because I guarantee you, he's still going to vote Republican in the next election cycle.
Who cares? Who cares even who the hell who's going to vote for?
Yeah. I mean, this is the guy who gave free advertising dollars to Trump throughout the primary and all that stuff. I mean, he is partly responsible for Donald Trump becoming president. He's one of the people that gave him free TV time every single friggin' day of the week during the primary and during the general election. Now we're like, oh man, I can't do this because of Trump. And now the hashtag resistance is going to embrace Joe Scarborough for growing a backbone and being less callous than he normally is.
Yeah, if this is not like, if this doesn't send off the warning signals to you that folks, the mainline Democrats are freaking mainstream Democrats. I've got their heads in the sand about where we need to go. I saw that. I'm like, really? That this is being celebrated as something like, number one, Joe Scarborough's still around, right? He's still on Morning Joe. I don't know. I don't watch it. I hear that it's happening, but I don't watch it. But the only reason why this is happening is because people think that they have a political advantage because of his attacks on Micah, right? And their threats and all this kind of stuff. But there were some really good points that have been brought up. Like, okay, wait a minute. They talk about this on the Majority Report. Like, okay, Joe Scarborough, right? And you guys are so worried that you're going to get blackmailed, or not, you're being told that you're going to get blackmailed by the Trump organization, right? Because they've got some dirt on you, because they know that you guys have been messing around and that you're, have a secret affair going on, right? You and Micah. Why didn't you talk about that then? Right? If you were if there was an attempt to blackmail media personalities, right? Attempt to blackmail the media, why wouldn't that be a story? Instead, he won't reveal any of his sources. He doesn't want to talk about it. It's only because they offended dear Micah, right? So somehow the Democratic establishment thinks that this is the kind of thing that's going to gain traction, right? It's the most ridiculous story that's out there, and to watch this hashtag resistance, like jump on the Joe Scarborough bandwagon. For anybody who cares about,
I heard his record went gold after this happened.
I honestly didn't know he was a singer until I heard it on Chapo Trap House. I mean, they played a piece of that.
I haven't listened to that yet.
Oh man! And speaking of which, Chapo Trap House is like the Sean basically, badgered me about Chapo Trap House podcast
for months.
For months. So you gotta listen to this thing, man. You gotta listen. They figured it out. Sean was on some like existential moment when he discovered them, but it's a really good podcast, and they had one, and the way that it's structured is that you have one, like you have a free show and then you have a paid show and things like this. I only get the free ones right now, but they had one last week. It's called Ubisoft or Ubisoft, which is a kind of a tech firm thing. They had a real discussion, interesting discussion on universal basic income last week that I want to come back to at some point, because I think that there was some awesome discussion in there, but also there's some things that were said were kind of indicative of some of the problems that we have on the left, is that we have this desire just to simply like criticize all this other kind of stuff without really thinking about like political stages and things like this. But that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, they played a piece of the Joe Scarborough song, right? I was mowing my lawn, listening to this, right? And I had to stop the lawnmower because I was keeled over laughing so much.
So on I became a member of that recently, and one of their podcasts, the paid ones, they had have you heard Mike Cernovich?
Yeah.
The alt-right white nationalist,
yeah.
guy who he has White House press credentials. Did you realize that?
No, that I did not know.
Yeah, so he has press credentials in the White House, and I guess it's Will Menaker, and Will Menaker is playing a portion of his book, Mike Cernovich's audiobook, on there, and it's Mike Cernovich like doing the annotations, like reading the actual book. And I just had to stop what I was doing. I had to literally just pull my car over and just like, oh my God, I'm going to crash. Because it was just like the way that they're just like ripping this thing apart.
Oh my God. That's funny. So I want to kind of blow through a couple things here. Then I want to get to this story from Charlottesville, because that was kind of really interesting. I mean, I think that yesterday, and if you guys want to hear what I got to say a little bit more about this, about the FCC rules and net neutrality, tune into the Rick Smith Show on Free Speech TV this weekend. We talk about that in the Resistance Report. Now we have to rethink that freaking hashtag after the Joe Scarborough crap. The one, so right, net neutrality, for anybody who doesn't know, basically net neutrality are the legal framework that was just codified under Obama. It was the way the internet's worked for a long time. It just basically means that, look, this podcast here, Raging Chicken Press, basically has the same access to the internet and the bandwidth that, say, Fox News or Breitbart News or the federal government does. Right. The idea that, a YouTube star has the same right to have access to the internet at the same speed as Comcast, right, and Comcast programming. Right. The cable providers, what they want to end that. They basically want to say, no, since we are the ones who provide it. Right. We are the owners of this intellectual capital. Right. This is essentially what is a play for right now, the enclosure of the internet. Since we are the ones who can control this, we want to enclose that and determine what goes out at what speed. So if it's our content, because Comcast owns a ton of shit, right? If it's our content, we'll make that go fast. If it's Raging Chicken Press, right? Or if it's a, YouTube star kid cooking show, yeah, we don't think, they're not paying us for that. So we're going to slow that down. All right. The first kind of set of this started happening. Ajit Pai is Trump's nomination. He's one who heads the FCC now. That was the first thing did is a guy who was a Verizon lawyer Verizon executive or whatever, basically, and Verizon, of course, is wants to end net neutrality. That was the first order of business, was to stop net neutrality. So that there's going to be a vote on this in the FCC in August. But yesterday was the kind of the day of action, the internet day of action. You had this kind of like strange bedfellows of kind of like Amazon, Google, and Netflix combined with, like freespeech.net and, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, independent journalists, independent media voices, and things like this. Even porn sites were kind of joining in on this about having access to a free and open internet. So that's all playing itself out right now. You have the big tech companies and kind of like internet freedom activists kind of joined together for a day of action. So if you went to our site yesterday, for example, you were greeted with a kind of a loading sign asking you to sign something, to send a letter to your senator and to the FCC, basically saying, stop this, keep net neutrality in place. So if you're interested in that, just go check it out. You go Battle for the Net. I think battleforthenet.org was one of the main organizing sites, or you can say, you could send something directly to the FCC, and we'll have a link for that in our show notes, where you just kind of click on it and you kind of send the email FCC saying, this is why the internet is important to me. Keep net neutrality rules in place. So that happened yesterday. We also last week, G20 summit out there in Hamburg, Germany. Won't go into that a whole lot, except for, there was some really good actions that happened there that got kind of overshadowed by the street fighting, right? Got overshadowed by the cars burning, by the police violence, the tear gas cannons and water cannons that were deployed, the militarization of the streets of Hamburg. And there's been a lot of talk back and forth about, the violence and militance of these protesters and stuff like that. So first, as we always have to say, right, of like the 100,000+ people that were there in protest of the G20, right, the richest 20 countries setting kind of the agenda for kind of more shock doctrine, more neoliberal politics, setting that agenda for us, saying, no, we cannot afford that anymore. The whole idea that we are walking into this dystopian nightmare, and these are the people controlling it. The idea that you look at the climate crisis, you look at the immigration crisis, you look at refugee crisis, you look at the continued disparities, increasing disparities of wealth, all that kind of stuff. These people were there protesting that, and that a group of people, right, kind of radical, militant, kind of many of them anarchists, not all of them, but basically took to the streets and had kind of pitched street battles with police It reminded me a lot of the global justice protests that I was involved in 1999, 2000, 2001, with those kind of lockdowns, except these ones were even more militant. And I think that, goes back to what Dr. Martin Luther King had said, right? A riot is the language of the unheard. And I keep on thinking about what we saw at the G20 summit in Hamburg as evidence of this, right? As basically saying, look, this is what we can expect. We've got a choice. We can either grab that new world, right, that another world, and get rid of the kind of the trajectory that we're on, or we can expect increase of this kind of riotous, these battles, these street battles and stuff, because those are it's only going to grow, especially once the clamps start coming down with climate change. Once we get the first major climate catastrophe, that's when you can expect the screws to go in fully. And these people are preparing for that. So that was something. But that's all I want to say about that for now. And because I think that a more micro version of that is kind of what we're seeing play out in the streets every day now. Sean has been covering a lot of this back and forth with kind of the rise of the kind of the neo-fascists, right? The white supremacists and the racist groups on the one hand, and Antifa and some of the cover of Antifa there. And this past weekend, he's taken a hard look at what was going down in Charlotte, Virginia, where we saw kind of another round of this, right, Sean?
Right. So one of the things I guess that my reporting on this stuff, right, especially it's happening here in Harrisburg, I don't like using the word Antifa, because yes, there are Antifa, which is short for anti-fascists, right? Antifa, I think, paints a broad brush over what you expect, right? Antifa means people in black, faces covered and stuff like this. But one of the things I've noticed locally, and with the other thing, these are anti-fascists, right? These are people from it, which means to me like a whole wide range of encompassing groups. So Black Lives Matter showed up in Charlottesville last week, Democratic Socialists, your anti-fascist organizations, and a bunch of people from the left, right? So what happened in Charlottesville over the weekend, you had like 50 KKK members showing up to defend the Confederate statues that were getting torn down in this city. And then you had 1,000 counter protesters show up in full force. And the counter protesters were able to drown out the KKK members. And really, I think that this is the type of model that the left needs to be looking at. I think we're past the point of having unity rallies a couple miles away from the action, to say, no, we don't support these people, but you don't confront them in the streets. I think these are the type of protests, like the responses that the left needs to start taking. Now, I'm not talking for violence or fighting in the streets. I'm talking about showing up and showing up by outnumbering them, 1,000 to 50. Show up and outnumber them 100 to 1. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so this is like one of the things that that has been that really that we've been following. And over the weekend, you had this large protest, like 23 people end up getting arrested, and really it remained peaceful. The reason why they were getting arrested is because it looks like that they were just there, like blocking a street almost, from the reporting. Couldn't really get a good review as to why they were arrested.
Well, this is what it says. This was according to the Daily Beast. They said after the Klan members left the event, right? So what we say ahead of time is that the Klan had this one space for between 3 and 4 p.m. And they just didn't show up at first, right? There was one guy with a Confederate flag apparently that was standing there, and then there was this building, and then these riot police escorted these KKK group out of this building or something, to the where their permitted demonstration was at 3:45, right? So they had 15 minutes there. And so the police escorted them there, and then the police escorted them here. And this is where it picks up. So after they're done, it says after the Klan members left the event, some protesters followed them to a garage where they were preparing to leave the city, taking issue with the fact that police officers were shepherding the members out like an arrival party of RoboCops. Protesters approached the line of police asking why they were doing this. The police officers then released tear gas to get the large crowd to disperse. As the proceedings died down with a few small skirmishes between protesters and police, about 23 people were arrested by the evening. Right. So it looks like that, they had approached it. Right. There wasn't any attacks on police or anything like this, but they were basically, calling the police out and saying, why are you, number one, dressed up in full riot gear, right, escorting these people out, which, what's the onset of that is, of course, I long for the day to see when the police are going to be escorting, right, anti-fascists through some place to make sure that they do that in the same way. It's not going to happen, right? But then their immediate response to being questioned on this and so on is to then turn and release tear gas. That's astounding to me.
Right. And we're seeing these reactions, right, happening in small cities, right? These are happening in communities. These aren't happening. And it's not Philadelphia. This is not Pittsburgh. It's not New York. It's not Boston. These are happening in cities in the South, right? This is happening in cities in Appalachia.
Yes. Which
have not been beacons of racial tolerance, right? Like over the past 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 decades. This is place like this is the epicenter of racial intolerance where these actions are happening. And you're starting to see a whole bunch of type of things, movements pop up. You have like all the anti-fascist groups, then you have some of the far left ones, who want to show up to with their guns. There's a group of leftists called Redneck Revolt, which there was a good write-up about them in the Guardian this week. A journalist from the Harrisburg area had a write-up in the Guardian, used one of our pictures from the Antifa rally.
I was going to bring that up right after this. Congratulations on that, by the way, Rashawn.
Yes, I just had to throw a plug out there. But no, I mean, like we're seeing a rise on the left, not the Democratic Party, not the hashtag the resistance left, but the left is starting to come together and join up to these things. In Harrisburg, we witnessed some things. You saw a bunch of different groups that showed up in Harrisburg, but not to these numbers. And then I guess one of the things that happened, which really catches me, we could talk about like the follow-up in the next segment, but Charlottesville police were showing up to the homes of these protesters in the weeks leading up to this demonstration, asking what they were doing. And some of the people they showed up to were arrested at previous demonstrations for assault or, just trying to scare people away from showing up and intimidate them into not coming out to last Saturday's action.
Right. I don't know, man. It's pretty.
And really, I guess what we're going to talk about in the next segment with this is how the police is responding, how the disproportionate response coming from law enforcement aimed at the left versus protecting white nationalists and protecting the KKK.
Right. Let me bring just a few things together there before we go to the break, because this is one of the things why I wanted to mention this stuff in the G20, because we've kind of led into this and talk about this as kind of a micro version of this. You have the same things in play, right? I love what you said at the onset of this, Sean, when you said basically you don't like to use the word Antifa, right? Because, and you're absolutely right about this, right? It basically paints this pictures in people's minds that everyone that's showing up were these, and that's not true, right? Just like we saw in the G20, you have a small group, black bloc members actually were engaged with these really kind of pitch battles with police. That was not the majority organization, the majority of people that showed up there, right? There were other people who were militant in their actions, but also nonviolent. Just like we saw there in Charlottesville, right? So I thought that was a good kind of distinction to say, look, you had a lot of people who were anti-fascists who showed up here. And that was not exclusive to like somebody in this group called Antifa. That were people that were saying, no, this is our community. We want to step back against this. So that's important. But then also, this links up to exactly the reporting that we talked about this last week. When the Harrisburg police were requesting this kind of upgraded riot gear and stuff, about the militarization of our police forces. So give an example, there was a civil rights attorney by the name of Jeff Fogel, and this is reported in this in Seville, I guess it's a Charlottesville site.
Now Seville is an indie outlet. It's an
indie outlet. Okay. So they were talking they were talking to this guy, Jeff Vogel, and Jeff Vogel was a civil rights attorney. And apparently there had been a lot of people saying that, the police, the police are people too, kind of stuff. And this is, and Vogel's response was quote, the city abdicated its duty to state police. The city abdicated its duty to state police. You can't treat cops like human beings when they're dressed like Ninja Turtles. Right. And so this is echoed also by a statement by Solidarity Civil, one of the organizing groups for that. When they said, quote, this is kind of, again, this was reported, sorry about this, in Daily Beast. And he said, look, the police provided the Klan safe passage out of the park while the community member called to police, do your job and protect us. Today and every day, the police were there to protect white supremacy, the group said in a statement provided to the Daily Beast. Right. And so you've got these two things, like you got the militarization of the police on the one hand, which basically creates this opposition. But then you've got this, almost standing army, right? This kind of like militarized police force. They're visibly and physically defending what is the legacy of white supremacy in this country, and not just a legacy, is the present of white supremacy there. All that stuff, kind of you put that into the hopper, it looks really bad. But all the more reason why, again, calling out and making it visible what the police are actually doing in these situations, and then to see the disproportionate violent response, I think is important there too as well. This is something that you've been continuously drawing attention to, right? The fact that when we're saying violence, it's not just like, this both sides do it, right? This both siderism garbage. When, somebody calling to police saying, hey, why are you protecting white supremacists? Why are you doing this? That is not the same thing as getting tear gas shot at you, right? For refusal to disperse. So we keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And one side's showing up to these rallies with guns and the other side's not.
Right. And the question is like, and what's at the core there? I think about this a lot, right? About what is it that we are supposed to be defending as a society, right? Is everything just simply equal? And you know what? I don't believe it is, right? I don't believe racism and white supremacy is something that we should be defending as a society. I don't believe that, kind of the unfettered accumulation of wealth, right, by a few people is something we should be defending as a society, right? Things like this. I don't think that's what's at its core. But I mean, I would hope that the vast majority of people would agree that we should not be defending white supremacy and kind of and violent kind of racists.
It's like, it's going back to my views have become a lot more like left on this. If someone's waving a Confederate flag in your face as a sign of speech, mm-hmm. I have the right as a show of speech to rip that thing out of your hands and trample on the ground. If you're gonna swing a flag like that in my face, we have every right then to rip that out of your hands. Yeah,
and I think, but here's where I get that entirely. Like, don't get me wrong.
Or when someone puts up like those white nationalist posters around college campuses, you have every right to take them down and burn them in the center of the campus.
Absolutely,
and make a counterpoint known that like you're not going to be tolerating this stuff in your community.
Right, but I think then we have to follow that up. Like, so say for example, because then look, somebody's okay. You're going to rip that flag out of that person's hand, then they have every right to hit you. Right. This is what we saw played out in Harrisburg that you reported on not too long ago. Right, and so they have the right to punch you, right, and kind of beat you up to get their flag back. And then you look at this, and you say, well, wait a minute. These are not equal things here, right? The taking of that flag, right, is basically saying we will not stand for white supremacy and racism in this country. The guy who punches you also is a physically assault to your body, number one, and is saying, no, I want racism, right? These things are not identical. They're not equal, right? And we have to constantly remind people of this because I'm telling you, I can't tell you. I mean, I hear this. I see these discussions happen online. I talk to kind of quote unquote liberals about some of this stuff and like, well, they have the right to say what they have to say too. Like, and I get that and it works in a very abstracted, very removed environment. And that's about it. But anyways, we're going to get into some more of this too right after the break because we're going to come back and Sean is going to basically take us inside Harrisburg for what may have been an inadvertent comment by Harrisburg police, but man, was it sure telling. So we'll be back right after this. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. We want to remind you to become a member of Raging Chicken Press for as little as $5 a month. You just go to ragingchickenpress.org, click on the support and membership tab, and you're beyond your way. Really, your support is what keeps us going and what enables us to pay our writers. This is what we want to keep on doing, and we want to kind of do it better. We want to do it more, and we want to hold power accountable. We'll be back right after this break.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. That was the day 2,500 pressmen, reporters, drivers, and clerks went out on strike against the Detroit News and the Free Press. Both newspapers had created a virtual monopoly in 1988 by merging their advertising and circulation departments into the Detroit Newspaper Association. Even as the DNA raked in record profits, they forced years of concessions, including wage freezes and layoffs. When the association implemented a merit pay raise system, the newspaper guild voted to strike. 5 other unions, including CWA and the Teamsters, soon followed. The newspapers, however, were ready. Just before the strike, they cut off the dues checkoff. They also contracted with the company Alternative Workforce to provide scabs. They also hired private security guards from Huffmaster and Vance International to enforce the scab herding. A solid union boycott cut revenues for both newspapers. On August 19th, hundreds of strikers stopped scabbing until police attacked the picket lines, breaking arms and arresting at least 4. Then, on Labor Day weekend, thousands of strikers and supporters successfully repulsed police forces amassed from across the state to break up the picket lines. By mid-September, both newspapers were forced to airlift the Sunday edition until strike-breaking injunctions limited picket lines. Over 100 had been arrested over the course of several weeks. Unable to stop production, strikers gradually returned to work until the strike was finally called off in February of 1997. In his 2-volume set, Workers in America, Robert Weir notes that many labor activists criticized strike tactics. They argued direct action to stop production should have been the priority rather than boycotts and political pressure. Once the strike ended, the DNA claimed all but a few had forfeited their jobs.
Welcome back to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop podcast. So before the break, we were talking about a little breakout of protests there in Charlottesville and some of the issues surrounding that, and some of the militarization of the police and so on. It's like, well, you know, Sean once again is broken yet another story related to this stuff in Harrisburg. And it came at a hearing that, you know, again, frankly, other people were there for, but just weren't paying attention. Sean, of course, tends to pay attention. So, Sean, take us into what's going on and what you kind of came across in Harrisburg this week.
So let me just start by unpacking it before I get into the nitty gritty about it. So last week we talked about the Harrisburg Police Department asking for $65,000 to get their riot gear upgrades, right? The gear that they're using, they're saying that they're troping around it. Gear is 25 years old, and it's time to get full head-to-toe riot gear. And the whole entire time they were calling this riot gear protective gear. Protective gear that de-escalates a situation. It, you know, keeps the officer safe. So therefore, the officer won't have to fear for their life, and the officer won't have to use harder force of use of force. Mm-hmm. There wouldn't be a harsher use of force there. And this is what the police chief is saying the whole entire time. And so last week, we reported on that. I went back and I started transcribing the whole entire thing, right? The whole entire hearing. And because I wasn't paying attention the whole entire time, I was, I was around taking pictures, taking videos and concentrating on other things. But I had my recorder hooked up into the mult box, and I have microphone quality audio that I was able to just plug into my computer and listen to. Mm-hmm. And really, this, again, what we said in the previous segment, this is another instance in how the police are more interested in policing the left and Democratic left-leaning protesters than they are policing the white nationalists and protecting the white nationalists, right? They're more concerned with surveilling the left than they are surveilling the white nationalists, right? Surveilling the people within their community, than surveilling the people who travel to Harrisburg to have their white nationalist, jingoistic KKK rally on the Capitol steps, right? So, for instance, at one point during the hearing, this is before he mentions the comment about the fusion centers, Captain Carter goes like this. This is a short paragraph. As recent as we did in several times, when Trump came here twice, we used it. And you're talking about the equipment they were using. That was a hostile situation for us. Now, Senator Toomey is up on 6th Street. This is going on as this hearing is going on as Senator Toomey's televised town hall is going up, or what is supposed to be a town hall. It's a potential for violence there. Protesters are there. Just recently at the Capitol, we didn't have any. But if the young lady who would have hit a police officer in the throat like she did with the horse, with the nail in the board, she would have killed him because we had no protective gear. So as he was saying that, right, I witnessed this assault, this alleged assault. Penn Live reported earlier in the day that there was no puncture wound in the horse, that the horse wasn't hurt, and that this happened as the horses were charging into the protesters at this rally, right? So if something could have happened, something could have been swung, but there was no damage to the horse, right? And I actually have a picture. You see the nail in the picture. It's a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch nail. And there were no puncture wounds. It was the nail was kind of hanging on the felt of the flag. It wasn't even hanging out of the board. And then, so keep this in mind. This is what he said here, right? And then Captain Derek Moody, a police captain, right, works under Chief Thomas Carter, goes on. It's about probably 15 minutes later, down in the transcription. He said, like the chief said, there's a level of preparedness where we monitor, we talk. Sometimes there's open source talking. A lot of times, what the groups are doing now is they will not talk openly. So what chatter we get or what information we get, there's always a send out. We send out to our intelligence center, to the fusion center, for the state is what are threat assessments of violence that's going to change the dynamics of it. Now, but just mothers and kids marching against whatever, schools closing early, that's going to be looked at, and it's going to be looked at more as a potential, okay, these are moms and kids attending this, scale it down. We may just need to be there off to the side. So that's what he said about so right there, he talks about sending intelligence to fusion centers, right? Mm-hmm. This is intelligence, probably social media and other chatter, that other information they get. They send it to a fusion center, which there's 3 of them in Pennsylvania, right? There's one in Pittsburgh, there's one in Philadelphia, and then there's one ran by the PSP, the Pennsylvania State Police. Most likely, they're sending it one to the one by the Pennsylvania State Police. These fusion centers, right? You send this information and they operate on a network. They're interlinked horizontally and vertically, right? So horizontally, they can go out to the other 80 fusion centers in the country, all around looking at crime assessment level, violent assessment, natural disaster risks, and stuff like that. And then that information could then be shared vertically between state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies.
So this is like I hear this, and the picture that comes in my head, this is kind of like an internal NSA, right? I mean, this is kind of like a ground up NSA to do surveil American citizens and to suppress opposition. I mean, I don't know how else to think about it.
Right. And really the kind of so at this hearing, right, it was a public meeting, right? But since it was not a voting session, there was no audio from the city recorded for this because it was just a public meeting. So really, only 5 of us out there have the audio or video to this. The people from the three new television stations, Roxbury, and myself, right? So we're the only people out there with this audio from this hearing that had the whole entire hearing verbatim. And couple of people kind of sort of brushed it off, don't you expect people to be surveilled if they're going to be protesting, living in today's society? Yes, you do. But
that's the problem, right?
Yeah, that's the problem. But really what this is, you're more concerned policing leftist movements, right? Obviously, you think that people in wheelchairs at Senator Toomey's town hall is a threat of violence, right? You're using that as a justification for riot gear, right? And then later on, all of them leave en masse to go up to Toomey to cite a bunch of people in wheelchairs who are blocking a door.
Yeah,
right?
but Sean, those people in those wheelchairs actually had hidden lances in them, and they were going to charge Toomey like knights in shining wheelchairs. Don't you get it?
So this
like whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
No, but I'm serious. I mean, what the hell is the threat? Again, this shows you exactly your point. That's exactly my point. Is that you're basically saying because the threat, quote unquote, comes from the left, even if they are disabled people in wheelchairs, right? We are going to treat that right in the same way we would as if someone was like threatening to me with a gun or something. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. So like this was only the only way I heard about this, right? If I remembered this, was just listening to this audio in my earbuds, and it's like, oh my God, he just mentioned fusion centers, right? I brought this up to Roxbury. I was like, Roxbury, did you catch this? He's like, no, why? And I'm like, listen, this is what they are. These are the concerns around them. And really, like, only two of us there like figured out like what these were. So what this really does is this now sets up the questions for, okay, so there's public-private partnerships involved with these, right?
Really?
Yes. There's potential for that. So who's to say that like a group like Tiger Swan, who's working for Sunoco Logistics and surveilling protesters in North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and other states with major pipeline projects, Sunoco projects, who's to say that they don't have access to this information?
Well, so is there actually, as far as you, I don't know, you might not have gotten down this road yet, but is there a process by which, say, private organizations can request reports and threat assessments from these fusion centers?
I'm not sure about that.
That'd be kind of interesting to find out because that's crazy. When you're talking about then as a public-private partnership, how does that break down? Who's the private actors here?
I'm not sure about that. This is something that you had to file written no request for, and you'll most likely get shut down.
Wow, this is something I think anybody got some information about this. I think get in touch with Sean, and I think he would be happy to dig into this even further. I know he's been pretty dogged on his reporting on this stuff. So if you got any of that, you can go to actually ragingchickenpress.org, and you click on our tips line right there too as well. Or you can we'll put a link in the show notes too as well if you have any information on that. But I think that'd be something really important for us to kind of unpack. Who are the players here, especially as there's been a gearing up to basically suppress some of these pipeline protests. For here. So anyways, I didn't want to get us off on track, but
so basically what they admitted to, right, in this, they're obviously like gearing up towards left-leaning protests, left-leaning activists within the area. The police are. You've had major demonstrations with anti-Trump demonstrations with Trump coming to town, or at least two of them within the past year. You've had major white nationalists and counter protest demonstrations. There's at least 3 or 4 of them. So there's like 5 or 6 separate occasions where they most likely have used this to surveil demonstrators and see what's being said online and really what's being said in different forums and stuff like this, and getting a threat assessment issued. Who's to say that, Tuesday with Toomey, are they a threat? Like, it really just opens up the whole entire can of worms here, which who are they surveilling? And to what extent the surveillance is going on, or this level of reconnaissance is going on.
No, exactly. And I don't know if you saw this week. It just makes me think about who gets lumped in here. Right now, as you know, the protests have been gearing up around the Atlantic Sunrise pipeline. Right, we've seen stuff in the Lancaster Stand and so on. And just this past week, a group of Catholic nuns. Basically kind of like constructed and ordained like a chapel right in the pathway of the pipeline construction on this land. It's going to the pipeline is going to come through their land. This is an order called the Adorers of the Blood of Christ. They're a Catholic order, nuns order, and so you could see, for example, given the past history of the way that this kind of intelligence has been worked, and what we've heard actually from some lawmakers about pipeline protesters, basically, being, I don't know, like the new standing army of Wolverines parachuting in. It's crazy that these people are the kind of ones that could be targeted. And I think, again, we need to know now whether, say, can those pipeline companies, right, can the gas companies like this request that information, or do they just put a call into the state police and saying, hey, listen, we need you to do here. And then now these people get put on this kind of, I don't know if they have like a watch list or a potential threat. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So has there been any, other than, most media outlets kind of looking at this like, oh, Sean, I don't know, you should be able to expect to be surveilled when you're protesting, right? We're in America, man. Right? You have the freedom to assemble under the big watch of corporations in our government, man. I don't understand what the problem is. It's in the Constitution, right? You could be surveilled. Not. It's scary that that's kind of the new normal. But so has there been any response? Have you got any kind of follow through from anybody after you've reported on this?
No, but I think no one's really spoken out to me publicly about it. But really what I think it is, it serves as a guide, or it serves as an issue for, people who are planning on doing demonstrations later on in the future, like have all this open chatter online, or start doing like meetings and stuff like that and get to know who you're organizing with.
Yep. No, exactly. Absolutely. Just to know when people say that, if you're talking about it on the internet, people are listening. Well, this is more proof to that. Crazy. Well, we'll keep on following that. That's absolutely for sure. And so meanwhile, while the, fusion centers seem to be going strong, lawmakers seem to be fine with just kind of saying, hey, we're going to pass a budget. We have no idea how we're going to pay for it, but, see ya. We're gone for the summer, right? This is what's going on.
Hey, Dave Reed has to go to his golf outing this morning. He had to
be time 8:30, so he might just be finishing up his game right now. How he plays, right?
I wonder if he did the front nine or the back nine. Which one does he prefer?
I think he prefers the back nine, Sean. But this is crazy, man. They pass a budget, so this is the second time in a row. Like, they pass a budget that has no plans for how it's going to pay for things, right? This has been the Republican trick, over and over again. But last year, Tom Wolf basically called him on it. Governor Wolf called him on it, sort of, right? Kind of, he basically said, I'm tired of playing politics with this, so whatever, you guys, throw his hands up, you guys do what you're going to do, is basically what it is. But Wolf refused to sign the bill, right, on Monday. On Monday was the deadline. So, the bill was moved forward. He had to sign it by Monday, or veto it, or not sign it. If under Pennsylvania law, he doesn't sign it, then it automatically goes into law without his signature. This is kind of important because this is something that Standard & Poor's, S&P, basically said that one of the reasons why Pennsylvania, they're threatening to downgrade Pennsylvania's credit rating was because of these kind of antics, right? So you think that would be a big enough warning now. And now the numbers are starting to come in, and it looks like, say, for example, that unless there's a revenue package passed, right, that not just kind of like says, hey, this is how these things are going to get funded, but it actually increases revenue in order to cover the costs that they passed, right, that we're looking at a potential 8-month deficit in the state. Right, where the state is going to have to begin to start taking out money and loans, right? You have to borrow money to pay for the Republican bill, right? And here's the kicker, man. Not only would they have to take out money unless they raise new revenues, right? Not only would they have to take out money, but the state, like the state organization that normally loans the money, right, could probably not, under statute, loan them that amount of money. So then the state would actually have to borrow directly from banks, right, at higher rates of lending. And guess what happens when Standard & Poor's comes and then downgrades Pennsylvania's credit rating again for the second time? those rates are going to be sky high, and we are all going to pay for it. There was a great picture, I think it was on Penn Live or whatever, of I'm pretty sure it was Dave Reed, and like the lawmakers leaving without a proposal for passing a revenue package to fund their budget. It's a picture of kind of like a Dave Reed kind of like smirking at the thing, like, going golfing, kind of thing. I'm heading out of town. I mean, am I missing something here, Sean? Or have the Republicans just basically left us hanging, and we're not going to know how the hell this stuff is getting paid for?
No. So like, basically that's correct. I mean, I've known all week that they weren't going to get it done. They were going home for the summer. Like I had staffers texting me saying, yeah, we're going home. Someone texted me, yeah, Germany says we're going to have a deal by Thursday. Republicans are saying we're going home and see you in September.
That's crazy. And so that's important for people to understand. When Shonda says, see you in September, because they're not scheduled to come back until September, and they're gone. Right. So, I was listening again, like I said, I listened to NPR this morning, and I got to the point where I could barely tolerate listening to NPR, but I listened to NPR this morning, and there's people in Pennsylvania, there are people, talking about, we haven't been here before. This is a potential constitutional crisis. We're like
failed state status at this point. I mean, this is where the Republicans are driving us towards failed state status. And so I was talking to someone, another news reporter, and he was explaining how Wolf really screwed this up royally. Because Wolf, as they were getting these the bills that were part of the deal through, like pension reform and other things, he was just signing them as they were coming to his desk, thinking that the Republicans were going to send him the revenue package when they needed it. Well, guess what happened? Wolf already signed everything into law that the Republicans wanted. So where's the incentive or the goodwill? Right. There's no goodwill here. Where's the incentive for them to give Wolf the revenue package? Who really wins here are the Commonwealth Foundation and Americans for Prosperity, who have been going around the Capitol the past couple of weeks and just telling these rabid anti-tax Republicans, you're not passing a revenue package.
Yep. That's absolutely right. And this is exactly what, again, we talked about this earlier, talked about this before. This is where we're saying the whole Koch funded network, right? And that billionaire of the Koch funded network, of which Commonwealth Foundation and all these other people.
There's at least 8 or 9 of them always sitting together, not 8 or 9, but 5 or 6 of them. But they're always sitting together, and they're always, sometimes there's 10 of them, but they're always going around the Capitol, and they're always, you could tell what they're up to,
Yep.
That they're not going to get this done.
Well, and again, when the Koch brothers and their network, basically, when they decided that, they said, look, they're going to sit out the presidential races, and basically said we're going to keep on concentrating on the states, and these are those organizations, the institutions like the Commonwealth Foundations and so on, who are basically carrying out those marching orders right here in the state, and to think that. I don't know. Either I'm torn on this. Either Governor Wolf is just a horrible politician and doesn't know how to do politics, right? Or he's naive, which makes him a horrible politician anyway. So either way, one way or another, this is just bad stuff. You sign this stuff into law, pension reform, which has been the wet dream of the right for so long in this state. We get pension reform, right? He's just okay, we'll sign that, and then you lose your leverage. Right? It should have been the message, right? Okay, you want pension reform? Pass your revenue package. Then I'll give you this. Right? It'd still be bad, but at least you get it. And they didn't. And to expect anything otherwise is just crazy. And and right now we're seeing what's happening over in Illinois, right? You're talking about failed state, right? You have a complete collapse of the kind of government, of the funding apparatus and all this kind of stuff. They're going in all sorts of debt and bankruptcy, all this kind of crazy stuff happening, 2 doors down, basically. And for Pennsylvania, they said, oh, yeah, la, 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 fingers and ears, whatever. We're just going to keep on moving forward. We don't care. But I got news for you, folks. It's not that they don't care. This is their plan. This is how, in their eyes, they win. Right? It's not they're just abdicating the responsibility. No, they see this as their responsibility to defund the state, to force financial crisis.
They won right here because of that. This is them winning. There's no new revenues. The state's going to have to go blow through its reserves, and we're going to hit a crisis point sometime in September, October, November, December, or sometime next year, and then we're going to then they're going to force more budget cuts down our throats.
Yep, and watch for the fire sale at that point, folks, because it's going to be like this. They're going to be like, we've got no money, and they say, well, we got to privatize the wine and spirits, right? Set it, privatize it out. Boom. Okay, I guess we have to do it. Better break up the state system of higher education because we can't afford to put. Boom, we're going to sell those things off. Right. And that's how these people think. Right. That's part of their agenda. And I don't know what it's going to take to get it through everybody's head that this is not about their lack of understanding about government. Right. This is the lack of our understanding about what they're up to. It's not that they're dumb. It's not that they're like, oh, they just don't get it. It's not that they're like, they should really care, but they don't. No, they care, and they care about getting their agenda passed, which is the defunding of the public. Right. It is the wholesale sell off of our Commonwealth. That's what they're after. So for this, it is a win for them. Right. Half of those people could care less about like, oh, what are my constituents going to say? You know why? Because they've been gerrymandered into safe districts. They don't have to worry about anybody except a primary challenger from the right, from the Koch brothers funded network. All the money and all the game is on the right. We got to get that through our heads, folks.
Yeah, I'm trying to like look at a list. I don't know if it was Commonwealth Foundation or Americans for Prosperity. Basically, they're the same group, but they've been they had a list of demands, right, of cuts that they wanted. You know, and some of it's like cutting out all endowments to the arts, cutting out public education. You know, there's some things that yes, I agree with, like stop subsidizing the horse and gaming industry to the tune of $250 million a year. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. You know, we shouldn't be horse. But now they're just out there pushing for welfare reforms. They went out and they attacked Medicaid in the middle of the night. You know, like literally at 7:30 in the night. They 7:30 Monday night in Rules Committee, they just inserted this amendment into the welfare code that was already on concurrence going back to the Senate, and basically would place work requirements and $50 copays for Medicaid recipients, you know, within the state. That would make Pennsylvania the only state in the country to have work requirements for Medicaid recipients. They did this in the middle of the night, and they voted on it the next day in the House, and then just left, right? So Americans for Prosperity, they have here's $3 billion in cuts they found. Selling off the state stores, $1 billion. You know, 195,000 let livestock producers fund their own livestock show. Let the farm show people, you know, fund their own farm shows, right? Who cares about the money that brings in? You know, the money you get back from taxes and revenue and tourism coming into the city, you know, for that. And Council of the Arts, $964,000. Let zoos promote their own tourism, $750,000. End the state's funding of food marketing research, $500,000. $167 million. Cut unnecessary spending found by the Auditor General. $153 million. Reform state employee health care costs. $1 billion. Repeal the prevailing wage law, which mandates that state overpay for construction projects. $3 million. End the transfer municipalities financial recovery revolving aid. $12.2 million. End the Keystone Communities program, which gives taxpayers grants to some local governments. Like, this is their list. This is their demands coming from the Commonwealth, or coming from Americans for Prosperity, coming from the billionaires and millionaires funding the state.
Yeah, and I don't know why we don't take them at their word as this is what they want. Because look, they've got the squeeze on it. It's like this. Here's our proposal, right? And you can be a good legislator and you can actually propose this and pass our cuts. Or we are going to come at you full throttle from the side, right? And to the point where, you know, we're going to cause a budget crisis to the point where you will have no choice but to do these things. I mean, that's their game.
Yeah, here we go. $11.4 million. Cut the Department of Conservation National Resources Tourism Marketing budget. You know, DCNR, cut that down. You know, who needs that? You know, since all that money, those tourism dollars that comes right back into the state because of all the state parks and game lands that we have.
Crazy, man. It's crazy. I mean, we're in for a world of hurt if these people don't come back. I can't imagine.
This is the shock doctrine economics they're putting on us.
Nail on the head, man. I mean, that's exactly it. That's where we're headed. And when by all indications is that when September comes, that is also the kind of like unofficial launch of the gubernatorial race, right, for 2018. So now, election. So basically, we're going to be in the thick of it then. Then it all becomes increasingly more politicized. So, I guess Dave Reed was quoted, pretty sure it was him, was quoted on NPR this morning, basically saying like, yeah, sometimes it's good to have a break. Sometimes it helps you, settle down and get back together and all that. Like, that is just like, that's pure BS, man. That is just like, how that is even like, anybody can say, oh, well, I guess sometimes that's true. Sometimes me and my kids, we have a fight or something like that. Sometimes it's better if we just go separate ways, cool down, and we come back and then we're all fine. Like, I mean, that is not the mentality of these people. So I don't know, crazy. So we'll see what happens. I one of the things that is of course in the crosshairs is the Pennsylvania's state system of higher education, which is on Wednesday, yesterday, from when we're recording this, Wednesday was unveiled their National Center for Higher Education Management Systems report. Right, it was $400,000 report that was commissioned by PASSHE to do a system-wide study, right, on the viability of PASSHE. Well, and you were there, Sean, right? And you were out there, and so not only was this we get this study released about the future of PASSHE, but there were, everybody says students really don't care. There were some students that were already out there attending the Board of Governors meeting in the middle of summer because of tuition issues.
Yes, about 10 students showed up from the Pennsylvania Student Power Network. They held like a silent demonstration when they were talking about tuition increases, which they did approve by 3.5%. They held a piece of tape over their mouth that said "Our PASSHE" on there, and they were there in this. They're pretty much like let the Board of Governors know and let Brogan know that they're not going to go away.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and I thought it was incredible that the students are like, nope. Yeah, you think that you can actually get some cooling off period from us? Not going to get it over the summer. We're here, and we're going to stand here as silent witnesses as you go about and, supposedly in our name, going to increase our tuition, right? And the best part about this was like right after that, when they were giving the presentation from this consultant that said, the one thing that you can't do to keep plugging the gap, raise tuition on students, right? So it's kind of interesting. One of the things I wanted to know in that discussion about the tuition, I don't know if you picked up on this, but this kind of like took me back a little bit. The Board of Governors has some students on it, right? And there was a student there who was arguing for a higher increase in tuition. And with the caveat that none of that money can go to paying increases in salaries for faculty members, right? I was like, whoa, how do you exist in the world, person? Right? I mean,
well, you do know these are like this is like a training center for your future union busters, pretty much at this point.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And
I think these students on here have no interest in protecting the student body, and all they have to do is just shoving their noses so far up Brogan's rectum, to show how much of a union buster I can be, and would you please give me a recommendation, for that job down the line.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating. If you're there as a student representative, right, you would think that at the very least you would have an idea that you have to you're there to kind of serve students, right? You represent the voices of students. But the students that got elected to be on here or chosen to be on here, no, they are just kind of like, they're as budget hawkish as the next person. Right. So you've got the students that are there from our PASSHE basically saying our PASSHE, white tape across their mouths with the our PASSHE hashtag, witnessing the kind of rise. Right. And again, what was also on the table, a 7% increase in tuition was also on the table, we should say. It ended up at 3.5. And that committee, which was the Finance Budget Committee, voted unanimously, right, to increase that tuition. So let's say there's
and
no
they also,
here.
Another thing, that committee, during the presentation, they were talking about how they also lost 1,300 students to enrollment declines this year.
Yep.
A lady was saying a portion of those declines came from people normally come from New York State into the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. But now New York State has free higher ed, free public higher education. And they feel like some of those lost enrollments is getting taken away from New York State. So as this was going on, before the tuition vote, they were talking about free higher education. How come they're losing students to free higher education in New York State? And then they vote to increase tuition by 3.5%.
Right. And what I was remarking, I was watching it. I mean, you were there. I was watching the whole thing streaming online, and I was tweeting out. Throughout the entire hearing. And what was remarkable to me about the one thing that seemed to be completely off the table was any discussion about the political reasons of why PASSHE is in the situation that it's in. Right. The consultant came out afterwards. Oh, everybody in this room has contributed to the problems of that. Okay, we'll give that. But the deep slashing budget cuts that came in under Tom Corbett's regime and the long-term slow defunding, right? The cliff funding, as you've talked about it, the long-term defunding of PASSHE, right, since its inception in 1983, none of that is discussed. Also was not discussed was that and like Arthur Anderson Enron accounting schemes that I've reported on personally, that we've reported in the Raging Chicken Press about what's been happening at the universities, basically to increase their debt on the backs of students. None of that was discussed, right? So it was as if, and this is what I tweeted, it's like they're talking about the budget of PASSHE like the weather. Like, well, looks like a cold front's coming, so I guess we better batten down the hatches, don't you think there, Bob? Right? I mean, that's what it was like. And it was that you get it. And once you're in that mindset, right, that you're just looking at the numbers and the numbers are magically neutral as opposed to the political causes of it, then you've lost the game. And this is why, going back to our point from the first segment, this is the leapfrog moment, folks, right? They know that students have left from New York, have gone back to New York. Why? Because New York has instituted a very modest free higher education program, right? So and this consultant comes out and says, look, you've got a whole bunch of solutions here that you normally try. One, you try to get increased state funding. Well, we've talked to legislators and they are definitely not interested in that. Well, you can increase tuition. Well, that's not really going to work. Why? Well, because the mission of this university system is to be affordable for working class students in Pennsylvania. And you've basically hit your limits about how much you can keep raising tuition. What do? Do you close down universities? That was interesting. We'll get to that in a second. No, we're not going to do that. Went through a whole list of things you're not going to do. The one thing that was not mentioned at all as a possible solution or as a possible recommendation was the political one that New York is doing, that California's been looking at, a bunch of other states are looking at, free public higher education, right? This is that leapfrog moment to make that case now, because that is the only thing that is going to save public higher education in this state.
Hey, if you look at the funding of PASSHE, right?
Yep.
The funding levels for PASSHE with this increase in this budget is still below this year's fiscal budget, is still below pre-stimulus dollars of the Corbett, the budget before Corbett's first cut.
Yes.
So they had the graph there, right? We are still below the base level, pre-stimulus base level funding in 2011, 2012, right? Going into, or 2010, 2011, right? We're still below that blue line. You had an extra funding and stimulus dollars, but the state is still funding higher education pre-2010, 2011, pre-stimulus dollars.
Exactly. And I don't know how much clearer it gets. This is where we're at. And this is why it made me sick at one point, Sean, to listen to all these people going on. Again, Democrats and Republicans alike around that table, especially the Democrats. The Democrats were especially wanting to make sure that they thanked Tom Wolf, right? Oh, thank you, Tom Wolf, for the increase in funds. And we feel so good. I wanted to vomit, right? Because everybody on that table should know. And if they don't know, right, they're idiots. And number two, but that's not what it's about. It's they got their heads in the sand and they refuse to actually kind of have any kind of vision or possibly how to solve this thing, right? We got to go big now, folks. Go big now. Again, single payer, number one. Two, free public higher education is kind of where this has got to go. It was hearing. Now, what was interesting about the report, now the full report is not due out until the 21st. And so once that comes out, then we'll dig in a little bit more on this. So what they gave yesterday is a presentation, right, in the graphs, and those presentations, that's available. And again, there's going to be a link in the show notes if you want to check it out yourself or what the presentation was. But the top level of concern about what the problem is, and the assessment was failed governance, right? That was right at its core. Basically saying the Board of Governors is actually not up for the task, that Pennsylvania as a whole, right, and the politicians that are writing educational policy in this state, right, they are not up to the task of actually having a vision that's going to solve this and it's going to treat academics seriously, right? They called for, and like, I was expecting, and I said this to you before the show, I was expecting like the major shoe to drop and saying like, yeah, you basically need to get rid of your unions, you need to sell off some universities, you need to merge them and so on. That's not what happened. Matter of fact, I found myself nodding to a lot of what this guy was saying when he was talking about, look, you got to actually listen to faculty when you're setting academic policy, right? And we're like, duh, we've been saying that for a long time. You have got to actually consult faculty when you're making these kind of decisions, all this other kind of stuff, right? All that governance stuff is basically saying it. And you need to stop this kind of managerial mentality that you have in the Board of Governors, right? He came down hard on it. As a matter of fact, and one of the recommendations was to disband the Board of Governors, right? So, where this goes is going to be very unclear, but the good news is coming out of it, at least as far as these recommendations are. Again, these are only recommendations that they paid $400,000 for, but they're only recommendations. They said, number one, you should not close down any universities, right? So I know like places like Mansfield and Clarion to a certain degree, and Cheney, for example, breathed a little sigh of relief on that. Also said, you should not merge things. You should not merge universities, right? Which is one of the other big concerns that was there. He said, look, we've seen them do this. They did this down in Georgia. And guess what? Doesn't save any money, right? Number one, actually costs a little bit more in the short term. And number two, what they find in the end is that, that those universities that used to be there, they've just now lost their whole identity. So you've lost your kind of brand idea, your core brand proposition, as Michael Brooks in the Majority Report would call it. But, so you don't do that. All right, so you don't do that. You don't, and he actually said this, which surprised the hell out of me too as well. You don't go after collective bargaining, right? You should respect the collective bargaining agreements, right? So what he was basically calling us, they say more flexibility, wanted some tweaks in, say, the governance structure, but most of it came down to the fact said, basically you people need to have some will to get some stuff done here. Right? You've got too much turnover at leadership. The leadership is not exercising its vision. It's not setting priorities and policy priorities, and it needs to. And, from the way that he was talking about this, it felt like in part like, yeah, I'm talking to you folks. And just from the camera view that I had, some of the people in the background, some of the Board of Governors and some of the, university administrators who were there looked shocked at what he was saying. Right? This is the first time anybody's heard any of it. So that's all interesting.
Yeah, we were all there expecting the reports to be printed. When they said no one has literally seen the reports.
Yep.
Until the slideshow being presented there, which I guess was surprising that like no one had no knowledge of what the reports were stating or said until like they go into it. We were all expecting to go in there and have the reports sitting right down there on the desk. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I thought, I think this was the approach to it in this way by having a public presentation, right? I don't know Cynthia Shapira, who's the chair of the Board of Governors. I don't know if this was her doing or Brogan's or whatever it was, but the idea to have that public like that, everybody's seeing it at the same time, I thought was a ballsy one. In some ways, I think that Brogan at least was expecting this to go a different way. But we'll see. Chancellor Brogan.
And to go his way.
Yeah, right. I think that that's what the expectation was from him, right? But we'll see. So this leaves things very unclear about where things are going to go. And there's an interesting target on Frank Brogan there too as well, because on the one hand, if you look at one of the recommendations is you could read it in this way, that you need a strengthening of the chancellor's office, right? So you can see this potentially as like Brogan power play, right? That, oh, good. Now I got to consolidate my power. But the interesting thing about it is that they're saying you want to consolidate some stuff in the chancellor's office so that it can have a more policy-oriented role, not this kind of managerial cost-cutting role and all this other kind of stuff, but one that set out the vision, right, and the academic policy stuff, like kind of broadly, right. The idea is basically, this guy's saying, is that you need an academic vision for the state system, right, and you need somebody with the leadership skills that actually can drive that discussion. That's how I heard it, and we'll see the details come out in the report. But what the interesting thing about that is Frank Brogan, right, the chancellor of the state system of higher education, of course, has never taught a day of college in his life. Right, the guy has no higher education credentials at all. Right, the guy doesn't have a PhD in higher education. The guy isn't taught in higher education. Right, he went from being like whatever elementary school teacher, or junior high school teacher, or whatever like this down in Florida, into kind of like ideological warfare against public education in Florida under Jeb Bush. Right, that's who that guy is. So it's interesting. On the one hand, you're saying you want a more consolidated chancellor's office to set this kind of policy with a guy at the top, right, who doesn't have the chops to do it. Right. So that's an interesting dynamic by itself. So we'll see. Now, this is going to be bookend, right? The full report will come out on the 21st, right, with those recommendations. There's going to be a lot of back and forth about that and people taking positions on stuff. We'll see that. But then simultaneously with this, the Senate, right, PA Senate decided that, it needed its own investigation into the sustainability of PASSHE. So that is underway right now, right? And they're due to come out with their findings no later than December 1st. Right. So chances are that we're going to see those findings that come back December 1st are going to be the right wing, the Republican response to this report. So we've got a kind of road to hoe ahead of us here to see what this means for the state system of higher education. But it's going to be a raucous year, I think, Sean.
Yeah. And I guess that Senate report's coming out from the Senate Education Committee.
That's my understanding. Yeah, they set up a kind of a task force to get this done.
Okay, so Eichelberger will be leading that. Good luck with that.
Oh, but he'll know where God's glory in the Capitol is, at least, Sean. You'll know that.
Yeah.
That's the future of higher education right there. So crazy. All right, so we'll see that coming up. We're coming up to a break right now, and when we come back, we've got some fun space news. And I've got some beer news, and we've got some precious news. We'll be back right after this to close it out and last call. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. We'll be right back. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. Over the past 6 years, we've brought unapologetic, progressive, activist media to Pennsylvania and beyond. We've helped hold those in power accountable and shine a light on some amazing activist work. We've broken national stories and established a reputation as an aggressive, independent media site. As newsrooms close and traditional journalists lose their jobs, hard-hitting, investigative news suffers. If we care about our democracy, we have to find new, sustainable models of journalism. And frankly, no one's going to do it for us. After the Trump election, we dug in even deeper. Thanks to some longtime members, one-time donations, and a shift in other resources, we brought on more writers and started paying them. Now we're doubling down and want to expand our infrastructure and pay our writers even more. We need to invest in our media if we have a chance to resist the unprecedented assault on democracy, working families, women's rights, and our planet. History will remember the choices we make today. So take a minute to become a member of Raging Chicken Press. For as little as $5 a month, the price of a local craft beer or a cup of coffee, you will be supporting homegrown progressive journalists and media activists. Go to RagingChickenPress.org and click on the Support and Membership tab to become a member. Leave a one-time donation or learn about other ways that you can help. We don't have billionaire backers. Keeping progressive, activist media going strong depends on you. Thank you for all your help and support. Keep up the fight. Welcome back to Raging Chicken Radio's Out the Coop podcast. And it's last call here, folks. Now, okay, I have to say is we got some we got some great space news this week, and this one I have to say was put on by the one and only Sean Kitchen. Okay, and I thought he was just messing with me, right? Because he's so hard. He was like, you got to see. I mean, if you saw, if we ever get around to actually doing full video of this, a full video of this show. You'll see Sean kind of basically starts to go to sleep or goes into like Twitter trance when I start talking about space stuff. So when he put this on for this week, I was like, you just got to be messing with me, right? So I'm just going to read you. This is what he put in our we have this like segment rundown thing. We kind of add things to in preparation for the week and so on. And this is what it says. It says Chinese masters teleportation, right? Making sending information more secure, right? And I'm like, whatever, man. You're messing with my head just to have some fun for yourself. I get it. But it turns out it's true, right? So, Sean, take us through the discovery process here, if you will.
So I'm just like going through my Twitter feed or whatever, or Facebook feed, and this couple of like articles pop up. I don't know from who, but basically what ended up happening is Chinese scientists have figured out, have taken the lead on winning. #winning.
They're so winning.
They're doing so much. They're doing so much winning right now over in China.
Why do you think Ivanka has her shoes made there? Come on.
They have managed to send a photon from the ground up to a satellite 300 miles above the surface, known as quantum. And they use the thing called quantum entanglement. I guess this will lead to like. They've been doing this. They had like 1,000 test cases and like 900 were successful for this. And it makes like quantum internet an actual thing now.
Yep.
Which I have no clue what that is. But
well, I think I did. I'm not even going to try to go through an explanation of quantum internet right now until I read up on this stuff again. I read some stuff a while about it, and I tried to explain a little bit what my understanding was to Sean. But I'm so like I'm not at all like confident, not even the slightest bit that I even got a third of it right. So, but quantum internet stuff is the kind of newest thing, and what they're apparently the part of this is what the Guardian is reporting on here is that this is something that science have been working on for a while, and why it matters to the internet is basically it would create a virtually unhackable internet, right? Now, again, unhackable for us now, until people learn how to hack quantum stuff. But I think it's fascinating. I mean, my understanding is not only you're talking about unhackable, but you'd actually be able to move data packages kind of much more quickly, right? If you're basically actually teleporting something from, say, here to a satellite, like almost instantaneously, and then back to somebody else somewhere else on the globe, right? Bouncing on satellite, you have a truly global internet system that is unhackable according to these people. But that's phenomenal. And just so people want to say, this is how the Guardian describes it. I'm just going to read kind of a couple paragraphs here just so you can hear this. This is really fascinating stuff. It says Chinese scientists have teleported an object from Earth to a satellite orbiting 300 miles away in space in a demonstration that has echoes of science fiction. Of course, to beam me up, Scotty, right? This is what my son, I can't wait to tell my son about this because he asks me like every other week, when are they going to invent teleportation, Dad? Right? My 8-year-old. It says, okay, this feat sets a new record for quantum teleportation, an eerie phenomenon in which the complete properties of one particle are instantaneously transferred to another, in effect teleporting it to a distant location. Scientists have hailed the advance as a significant step toward the goal of creating an unhackable quantum internet. And from the professor who's involved in this, he says, quote, space-scaled teleportation can be realized and is expected to play a key role in the future of distributed quantum internet. The authors, led by Professor Xiaoyang Liu from the University of Science and Technology of China, wrote in the paper. So, I'm sure Trump is all over this, right? And his organization is fully prepared to accept the science of this too as well. Be interesting to know if there's anything to do with the Chinese, scheme, the concocted hoax about climate change. I don't know.
We're winning, man.
you're winning, man. We're winning so cool. Now they do say that there's, this does not mean that they imagine that we're going to be able to move humans, anything. Moving a living thing is something entirely different, people. But man, you can't tell you when Sean told me this was actually real today, I do have to say I was like giddy that this is actually going on. Fascinating stuff. The other thing that we got in space news for today is that NASA, this is like phase 2 of basically what amounts to a Mars housing program, right? Not exactly, but
HUD for Mars.
Yeah, HUD for Mars, right? We can't do it for the Earth, but man, we can do it for Mars, right?
MHUD, mud.
There you go, Mars urban housing. There you go. Universal housing, right? How about that? But basically, the deal is this, right? So, if anybody has any doubt that the Mars stuff is real, you look at kind of the way that NASA is moving forward pretty directly here, and we have to say that we got our own vice president, Mike Pence, is a huge space fan, and basically came
next week.
Oh man, wouldn't it be awesome? Hey man, hi, my name's Kevin Mahoney, and I do this space cast thing, right? For a little place called Raging Crater Press, and and I know you love space. I saw you touching the rockets and stuff, right down here in NASA, and you gave a good speech. We'd like to come on the podcast, right? But yeah, he's Mike Pence was apparently a huge proponent of space stuff, and behind the Mars thing, basically saying we will put someone on Mars. This is important for a couple of reasons. One, because of what I've been hammering at. If someone like Mike Pence is behind space exploration, right, check your frickin' wallets, right, and know that the expansion of neoliberal, complete, ultra-free market capitalism is bound for a galactic future, which is why we need to pay attention to this again. Sorry for the record, repeating this record over and over again. But anyways, so when
I'm
NASA,
still waiting for your neoliberalization of space articles to start hitting the forefront.
They will. I'm gonna have a column, man. I am. I'm serious. This is. I just got to get. I just got to just set aside some time and start doing this because it's true. It's true. It's true, man. It's true. But what NASA has been doing, basically, they're trying to solve this one problem about Mars because there's two versions of Mars. Basically, there's more than two, but there's one where you kind of go and you basically send people to Mars, and then they come back. Right. And then they just have they set up some stuff there, do some experimentations, and then they have a little orbiting space station or something like this, and they come back. That's one. The second one is actually establishing a permanent colony on Mars.
I was going to say a debtor's prison.
Well, yeah, that's one of child slavery, sex slaves, right? Child sex slaves too, as well. That's the other one.
Mars slaves.
All right, just listen to Alex Jones on that if you really want to know the inside scoop, because he's got all the insider information. Dude, I don't know how he cultivates those sources, but not. But so what NASA's been doing is they've been trying to they have been running these contests, right? And specifically is like, well, how do you actually deal with a habitat on Mars? Because the problem is that if you're trying to transport an entire habitat from the Earth into Mars, that's a huge payload, right? So it's going to, weighs a lot, which means more fuel, which means more greenhouse gases, of course. But it takes more to get it there, right? It's more complex. It saves a ton of money, right? If you can actually send some raw materials and some machinery, you actually construct it and build it actually on Mars, right? Either way, you have to have something that's collapsible and transportable in a rocket, or you have to have something that's constructed on Mars. Well, what the interesting thing about this contest that they're running, they call it the 3D Printed Habitat Challenge, is that they're going with, say, 3D printing as a way of printing out on site on Mars, these new habitats. And the interesting thing about this is this. Number one, the primary material of several of the winners, I can't remember how many of the winners exactly used it, but a bulk of them were using recycled materials, right? So you could potentially have what's your construction material is basically those plastic water bottles that we just can't get rid of, for example, as a way of constructing the beams and the main apparatuses of these habitats, right? On the one hand, and then also using stuff from the planet Mars itself in the construction process, right? Because if you can actually use materials that are actually on the ground on Mars as part of the construction process in this 3D printing thing, you're obviously going to save a lot of weight and transport and that kind of stuff and cost. So one, very lightweight materials like recycled plastics and things like this could be used in the construction of this. And the stuff on the ground. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And so the first prize went to, you'll love this, Sean, right? In our winning theme for the day, the winning candidate for this housing stuff was from South Korea, right? South Korea, which with the sad part about it for me, actually, with the South Korea thing, the worst part about it is like the poor schmucks weren't eligible for any of the prize money. Because I guess that NASA part of the rules were that if you're gonna win it, and you had to be an American in order to get paid out, right? But they're South Koreans, so they're not going to get the money. So they won the prize and they're not going to get the money, which is pretty crazy.
Not even a participation trophy.
No, I think they got a pat on the back. No, but they had a 3D printed beam. This is part of it. They had to construct, I guess the beams are the major thing that they're trying to work on now, is by this team from Moon X of South Korea. They won first prize in this phase 2 competition for the 3D printed habitat one. So that's yet another step forward to exploring the planet. Pretty cool, if you ask me. And there were some Americans that actually won second prize, a third prize, or things like this. What's also interesting about this Moon X construction, I didn't have a chance to look into this, but they sound like a private company. The second place was from Oregon State University called FormForge, and the third was a place called Foster and Partners from Branch Technology of Chattanooga. So as you can see in here, you've got both folks from universities and from private sector who are competing in this challenge for this stuff. So keep your eyes on it, folks. But phase 2 of the structural member competition was all good. And there we have a prize winner. So we're one step closer. 3D printing on Mars, man. Pretty cool. We've reported on beer in space, right? Which later this year, we're going to find out about how that experiment goes out. And now we've got a habitat, right? So you've got your pub and your beer. That's all we're talking about. Oh, and fittingly, Sean, I was very happy to hear this. Pizza Boy is joining in the space love, man.
Are we?
From what I hear, based upon the names of their beer releases.
Oh, flying laser beams?
Yeah, flying laser beams. That's awesome. Yes. What is flying laser beams?
It's a light IPA we have. It's a 5.5% IPA. It's really nice and fresh. And then the other one is Haters Tears, Rye Me a River. Which is going to be a rye goes.
Well, and doesn't the Haters Tears have a history to it?
It does.
You want to tell us, or can't you tell us?
I can tell. Basically, a bunch of people were complaining about some of the sour bottle prices a couple years back, and so they brewed a beer called Haters Tears, and they have glassware to go with it. And the glassware has a baby crying on it with some tears, and it's like the size of like a baby bottle, and on the back it says "Salt it with the tears of entitlement."
Oh God! Customer's always right, I guess. No, the brewer is.
But I mean, like, some of the sour bottles can get out ridiculously expensive, especially when they hit the retail stores, $50, $60 a bottle for some of the sour stuff. But I mean, as you know, going to Free Will, right? Mm-hmm. And it takes up a lot of time and space to build these bottles. I mean, like, you gotta make sure the climate's right in these rooms. You can't cross contaminate, because if you do that, you'll destroy your whole entire brewing system. Pretty much, if Brettanomyces, the wild yeast they use to brew these sours, these barrel aged sours, get into your regular brewing equipment, the yeast is so aggressive, so it'll just destroy everything. So you need like an off-site location or a room that's completely quarantined from the rest of the brewery, rest of the brewing process. And it's basically like a lot of different, money goes into brewing the beer, but also money goes into the energy that's used and the time and space that they consume to correctly ferment for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, no, I remember that. And, again, it's like the kind of stuff, beer culture is weird like this, right? People get like pissed off. Oh, you're a bunch of snobby little blah, 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 blah. And that, whatever. But, I look at that, I look at those releases that they did. Because wasn't it something like when it came out, there was some sort of blackberry or.
It was a black sour, I think.
Black sour. I did buy one of those bottles, right? And it was really good. It was really, but it was way expensive. There's no doubt about it, right? The way I look at it is like, this is like, this is kind of a cool, creative experiment, right? I mean, this is kind of a cool, opportunity to try something out, to process it, all that. And that was, I thought, was the kind of exciting part about it.
It is basic capitalism. People are willing to pay the price, and you charge the price people are willing to pay. How much are you willing to pay? Okay. It's not, there's some bottles they put out I won't buy because of the price point, but there's some bottles that are $25, $30 that I'll buy regardless of the price point because the beer is that good.
Right. No, exactly. Like, so what do they do then? So with the Rye River, what makes this one unique this year?
It's the haters tiers. And I think they like it. So it's a Goza is traditionally a, German, it's a wheat beer, right? It's a Hefeweizen, but then sour, and then it's a Berliner Weiss, right? Mm-hmm. A Berliner Weiss is a soured German wheat beer, and then to make a Goza, they add a salt brine solution to the Berliner Weiss, and then you get a salty sourness. Usually, I guess the grain builds all wheat. This year they have a little bit of rye in there, so they call it Rye River.
Very cool. Have you had it yet?
Yes,
and
it's really good.
Awesome. Well, there you have it. Rye River. Wah! And get your laser beams. Pew, pew, pew. Pew, pew. I would love to see the looks on people's faces. I just kind of came into Pizza Boy and picked up the latest, what is it called again?
Flying laser beams?
Flying laser beams, and sat down and kept on drinking and going, pew, pew, pew. I'd have to do it while you're working and wear my Raging Chicken Press hat just to embarrass you. Oh, man, crazy. Well, anything else for the good of the order, Sean?
No, nothing out here. It's pretty much it.
Pretty much it. Well, the one thing that I'm going to leave everybody with today is that I'm going to leave you with a little clip of something that made me laugh my ass off. And that is a little bit of the guy who plays Gollum, right, in Lord of the Rings, was on the Stephen Colbert show this week. And Gollum, well, Colbert asked him to read Trump's tweets in the voice of Gollum. And it was a glorious, glorious thing. So before we go, I'll play you a little bit of this.
It's also in there. If you want to do it up here, it's also in there, whatever you want to do. Yeah.
The fake news media has never been so wrong or so dirty. Purposely incorrect stories and phony sources to meet their agenda of hate. Sad.
Just you can lose this one. Just that one if you don't mind. Yeah.
Despite the constant negative press, kerfuffle. Wait, what's kerfuffle, Precious?
No one knows. That's the most beautiful thing.
All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press, and we will see you next week. Today we went on Thursday instead of Friday, so if you're tuning in on this Friday and you're wondering, hey, why are they talking about things that happened yesterday? That's why. Had kid issues, and that's the kind of thing we're trying to find a time where my kids actually are not just sitting around for half the day because I'm doing the podcast. So we kind of moved it to Thursday this week. Next week, I'm going to be doing the podcast from a remote location, not from the mountains this week, but we'll do it for some other place. So we'll get that set up. But we'll be back next week. And until then, folks, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press, signing off. Talk to you then. See ya.